Hey, everybody, welcome to another What side of the microphone am I on here? There we go. Hey, everybody, welcome to another Reel Debaters production. I'm your host, Micheal Petrow. Before I forget to do this, because I'm a forgetful guy. It's not because I don't give a shit. I'm just forgetful, and I always want to do this. I always want to say thank you to everybody who's listening to the show, and I always fucking forget because I want to make this as quick and painless as possible. And then I ramble. We know I ramble. If you're new, I ramble. But I want to say a big shout out to like a fuck ton of places, specifically San Jose and San Diego in California. Like practically there's all these pockets of California that people are listening to the show in. Shout out to all of our Canadian fans as always. Specifically, want to highlight Niverville, Stonewall, and Winnipeg. Winnipeg, yes, right? We got a little thing in here in Winnipeg somewhere. Shout out to everybody in Winnipeg. But Stonewall and Niverville was like, hey, what's up? So anybody in Stonewall and Niverville who's listening to the show, and you're listening again, shout out to you. That was cool. We always knew you were there, but we couldn't tell it was from there, right? We knew we had people listening. So that's cool. So thank you. This is where I start to ramble. So that's out of the way. Shout out to everybody who's listening to the show. This week in the living room, Roger Boyer, Winnipeg filmmaker, videographer, producer, writer, director, and podcaster. Just a fucking savant. Came on the show. We share a couple different film friends in common. They were like, this guy should be on. I was like, of course, everybody should be on. This is a revolving door of everybody should be on. So we got to sit down, me and him, talk about what got him into film, what he sees through his lens, what inspires him. We talked about some of the movies he's made, specifically his shorts, The Maintenance Man, super powerful and short. That's what you want in a short film, I guess. The Maintenance Man, Hockey Dad, Hockey Dad, and lastly, The Lost Moccasin. Roger's an indigenous filmmaker, so we talked about that genre of film that I was incredibly happy to be exposed to and talk to somebody about, because I'll be quite honest, like I don't know where to start. So it was great to be educated on that, and just a myriad of things. Me and Roger had so much fun. It was such a fucking blast. So thank you for giving us your time, sir. If you want to follow him, just check out the guest bio. We'll have all his links there for you to watch some of the shows. If you want to see Lost Moccasin, you'll have to contact him directly for that, which we'll have all of his credentials there. For the newcomers, thereeldebaters.ca. That's where you can find everything related to the show at Reel Debaters. That's how you find us on Twitter and Instagram. And if you want to email the show, it's thereeldebaters@gmail.com. You want to tell us we're fucking morons, you want to give us an idea for the show, check out our Patreon page. We got some cool stuff there. If you want to help support the show, there is a little producer thing on the Patreon page, which is on the website at thereeldebaters.ca. So you can be a part of it with us. It's immersive. We're doing some fun things. We're coming up with some actual execution of ideas for 2021. Speaking of which, we're doing TV now, because why the fuck not? 2020, it's a dumpster fire year. No, we wanted to start originally with anything that could be played on a reel, but kind of play in a niche, because as we've slowly gotten better, we didn't want to get too big and do too much. But now that we kind of feel we have a system, we're going to do TV, because everything was played on a reel originally. So that makes sense. And for everybody who is wondering how do you spell reel, it's not R-E-A-L in all of our nomenclature. It's R-E-E-L. So that's how the email address, the website, all of it is R-E-E-L for the spelling. That's it. Oh, yeah. For newcomers too, I did an interview with Kevin Smith, a.k.a. Silent Bob. AKA I fucking did that. It was so crazy. Thank you to Skip the Dishes for putting that together and allowing me to do that. That was incredibly daring of you, I will admit. But it was a fucking great time. I never actually, funny story, I didn't actually ever, me and Kevin Smith, he doesn't know my name. So if he was ever to point out that video, he doesn't know who he talked to, because I introduced myself and then he took over, right? So I'm Micheal, Kevin. And I know you checked out our Twitter feed after, so kudos to you for fucking doing that. That was awesome. But I'm Micheal from the Reel Debaters. I'm the guy who you got to talk to with Skip the Dishes. So there you have it. I got nothing else for you, so I will cue the reel. You enjoy the show. Good afternoon, Roger. Thank you for joining me virtually in my living room, which is actually my bedroom. I don't know where are you in your house right now?
I'm in my office.
You're
Thank you for having me.
yes. Thank you for. We've been talking about this for a couple of weeks, so I always like putting interviews as far out as possible, so I have more time watching stuff that someone has made or reading something that somebody has written and kind of getting to know them. So excuse me if I have a one world view of you only through watching what you've made, and you can correct me as we go. But as my favorite interviewer has done in the past, James Lipton, it's best to begin at the beginning. And the whole purpose of this series is to celebrate Manitoba filmmakers, celebrate the Manitoba film industry. We've affectionately titled it Manitobans Making Movies. So, however you want to view whatever that would be a short film, long feature format, docu-series, what have you. We don't care. We'll talk about it with anybody. So, your name has popped up with a bunch of other people that we share friendships with through you working with them in the industry and me just being a hang around. So I wanted to get your perspective, Roger. How did you get into film? How did you get into this crazy adventure of making movies?
Well, it's all started. Wow. Okay. Well, let me think back. How did I get into film? Um, my cousin came over to my place to show me his new camcorder, and this was back in the early aughts, around '05. And I had recently discovered this editing software on my computer that we just got, and editing software was called Windows Movie Maker. And when my cousin showed me his camera and I saw this new editing software called Windows Movie Maker, I was going, quite literally looking at the editing software, looking at his camera, looking at the editing software, going, for about a few minutes. And I was like, hey, let's make a film. And he's like, that's so crazy, it just might work. Get at it, like he just gave me that look. But I ended up making uh, a little promo video for myself when I was running for student council back at university, and I edited it. I This is the whole process of it, but I had to figure out how to do that. So I kind of just self taught, researched, and then I finished it, but not in time, not in time to show it to anyone for running for student council. So I didn't win anything in student council, but it was a fun process. um, a few months later, I kept thinking about it, and I thought, hey, why don't I make a short film? So I talked to my cousin about it, but he was kind of like he kind of lost interest at the time. So I had found a local store, I think it was in the Maples area, that was selling a DV camera, and I just thought, hey, why don't I just purchase a DV camera? I'll just have one. I'll make it myself. So I bought this little Canon DV mini DV camcorder that used tapes, and I wrote a film called Rentless. And Rentless was just really about I get two roommates with a crazy landlord who comes looking for the rent, and now one of them spends all the money, and they have to figure out how to get the rent paid.
I've done that in real
And
life.
it,
That's that. I've done that before, buddy.
yes, so you can see this. I wrote for what I knew. So myself too. So me too also. Um, I liked action films, and I figured I was making an action film. So in the story in Restless, the character he enters a fight competition, which his roommate says that's the stupidest thing ever, but let's try it anyway. So it took me a few weeks, and then we shot this film, and I just asked some people for locations. I used my friend's location at the time. He was living in his one bedroom suite. I don't want to call it basher. It was one bedroom apartment, and we filmed it mostly on a Sunday, and then we filmed at the University of Winnipeg on during the evenings over that week, and then we filmed the fight scene on a Sunday. I had access to a large gymnasium, and it was a really good. It was fun. It was a fun process, but it was just something natural that came natural to me. And I'd researched like what do you need to make a film, so I looked up all these articles and research and whatever websites. I think video was it Video Maker was the main website that had all these articles, and there was other articles too, but that's the main one I remember. And he talked about um, like find a cameraman, figure out your sound, get a good microphone. So like I went around town finding microphones to plug into this DV camera, And I was thinking, I don't know any cinematographers. I don't know any cameramen. Well, why didn't I just figure this out? But luckily, I'd come across a movie director, a movie I'd watched years prior called El Mariachi, and Robert Rodriguez put out a video and an article saying like, just do everything yourself, just do it, get your stuff, work with what you got, and just make your film. So with that, with that spirit in mind, we went ahead and we made Rentless, and Rentless was my first ever film I made with no experience, kind of self-taught, and it actually ended up playing at the Gimli Film Festival. But the one compliment
Nice.
I get on it is like, how did you know where to put the camera? How did you know how to do this and how to do that? Like, how did you write the script? And I always tell them, like, I honestly was just an instinct. It was instinctual. That's the best thing I can say, is that everything on my first film, Rentless, was instinctual. And writing the script was just, I read Shakespeare in high school, like we all did, so I just kind of used that same form of writing a play. All I did was just write the description, uh, character, character name, then character talks, and I worked that all like in a Word document, and I wrote 10 pages of that, and I used people around me, like just some friends of mine, Ray and Dave and Angela, who I went to school with at the time, and they just all agreed to be part of it. And I didn't know any actors, I didn't know anything about filmmaking. I just figured, it was just, but it was just something I needed to get into. It was something I've always wanted to get into, and I realized that over time. And I we made that film, and it was a hit amongst my local friends because I never really did put it out there. However, if you do want to see it, I have a version of it on my Vimeo, and I apologize if there's anything bad in there just ahead of time. So if you go look on Coach B Films on Vimeo, it's still up there. But it inspired a feature film that I want to make. I would love to make a feature film based on that, and I always call it the indigenous kung fu hustle, and that's what Rentas is going to be in the future. Is I want to make it the indigenous kung fu hustle in the future, and I'm currently working on it. I do have like an 80-page old draft of a script I wrote over 10 years ago, that I'm going to retake and redo over, and hopefully I'm better at a bit better at writing. But that's how I got into it. And after I got in, after that, I guess the next step was I was showing people locally that I talked to, and one gentleman had said, "Oh, hey, I work in film," and I'm like, "Yeah, right." Like some guy hanging out. I forget why he came to the university, um, but he had said, I work in the local film industry," and I was thinking, oh, "Sure, buddy, like sure, whatever." But he brought a friend over with him, and they were hanging out in the student lounge, and I was like, "Hey, what, did you guys want to see my film I just made?" And it was called Rentless. And, well, obviously it was called Rentless, but I told him it was called Rentless, and I showed it to them. And his friend he had with them, was also a local filmmaker who happened to work at the Winnipeg Film Group. And they watched the film, and he said, "Hey, can we enter this into a film festival? Can you, once you come to the Winnipeg Film Group?" And like I didn't know anything about the full film industry, and I was thinking, sure, yeah, okay, I'll come to the quote unquote Winnipeg Film Group. But he gave me the address and time. I said, sure, I'll come check it out. I'll come say hi. So I went there, and it was a legit organization. Like these guys weren't trying to jump me. So I was pretty cautious about it ahead of time. So I was like, okay, I don't know these guys. Like I do know them, but I didn't know. I didn't
Yeah.
know anything about the industry. So I didn't. When someone says back then, "Oh, I work in the industry," I'm thinking, what does that even mean? I didn't understand that. But as I grew and I became more part of it, I understand what that means. What it does mean is there's like pretty much there's no main office. The office is very, when you work in a film on a larger film set, the office is where you rent the building out. There's no studio.
Yeah.
And you film all over Winnipeg, and there is a central location, but it's temporary, and it moves all the time. But that's what I mean by, like, I didn't know anything about the industry, but now that's kind of how there's a lot more to it. There's people who can explain it a lot better than I can. Um, but the Winnipeg Film Group introduced me to this whole other world of making films, and they've been part of my life pretty much ever since. And it was all just kind of random how I made this film, and I showed it to a couple of these so-called, at the time in my mind was filmmakers or
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
working in the industry, but what they were legitimate, and they introduced me to that, and I've been making films pretty much since then. But Rentless was my first film, and a film called 210 was my second film, and I made those two films with my um, with that Canon mini camera. Actually, 210 is on my YouTube page if you want to watch that. But those are two films that I got a lot of praise for. That asked me, how did I know where to put. How did I know how to do that? And I just said I self-taught, and I just kind of figured compose my shots how I compose them. I use non-actors. I just used my friends at the time, and I just I don't know. I can't explain it. I just that's just it was always an instinctual process for me. But it made what came out of that was everything. It just made sense. Getting behind the camera, filming, it just made sense to me.
I love that.
And there you go. And now, man,
Yeah.
there you go.
No, that's the perfect answer, man. You know that. I love that it's so instinctual for you because everything, like everything that I've watched, it's very. There's a storytelling aspect that we'll get into later with there's a thread that I noticed through it, and you can call me a bullshitter or you can say, hey, wow, yeah, you're right. Later, we'll wait for that, but I do love how instinctual that story is because most people, like I can say, from going from being a salesman during the day, very generic, to trying to do something, any sort of creative endeavor. I Podcasting was not instinctual to me. I was like banging buttons and spilling things, and like I didn't know where to put my hands. Like I felt like I was playing volleyball. I didn't know whether to like bump or volley. Right? You're just like you're confused of what to do. So knowing that this thing that you do that looks so great is just like it's like riding a bike for you. That's a I love that. That's where it all came from. That's its genesis. What are some of the films that like you pick up this DVD camera, right? And they all the greats, I think we can both agree, start saying, just shoot, just do it. Just get out there and make stuff because the only way you're going to learn is if you're going to do it. But what were some of the films that kind of inspired you to keep going, right? You found this thing that you're good at, but so like what inspires you? What filmmakers at the time were you emulating? You said Robert Rodriguez. Was there anybody else?
Definitely, I can. What I can say about that is I grew up more or less 90s. I guess we're probably around the same,
Yeah.
you know, same level, life level.
Yeah. No,
We'll
I
say
agree.
we'll call it.
Yeah.
um, and I grew up in the 90s, and a lot of the films I used to watch. One big film, and I think this, and other than Redless, I've never made another action film. Well, I kind of did make a little action skit, and that's on my Vimeo page. But I never actually set out to make an actual martial arts action film. But Enter the Dragon, Jackie Chan films, The Protector. I love all those films growing up. I love those films.
Yes.
There's such a huge part of what I've, now that I imagine it, I'd love to do in the future, which is why I say Rentless. There's action in that film, and I want to. She was cheesy action. I will say. I mean, but uh, definitely, I do want to make the indigenous kung fu hustle, and Rentless will probably be that film. But it's going to be that film, I should say. It's not probably. It is going to be. Um, all those films I grew up with, Enter the Dragon, Jackie Chan's the Protector. Well, the Protector. I shouldn't say the Protector. That was all right. Police Story was the bigger one. Um, but after that, one of the I remember watching a VHS tape at my buddy's house, and he didn't really get into it. He was, I think he was hanging out with his girlfriend. I was just hanging out with him, and he rented this film called Clerks. And
Here
so
we go.
I watched this film called Clerks, and it's kind of coincidental that Kevin Smith was. I didn't know who Kevin Smith was at the time, but obviously you had just interviewed Kevin Smith a few days ago. I hope I'm not spoiling it for anyone,
No,
but
no, no, no,
so
no,
that was
no,
really
no, no. You're not.
really interesting that this whole thing came about that I watched this film. But it wasn't just that. Like it was something about that. There was a spirit of that, but I think it was more this guy Jay was in the film that he was all crazy in Clerks, and it was just something about that spirit of that film that just stood out to me. But that was one of the films I remember seeing years ago. So I watched, like, obviously I look him up and I'm like, oh, hey, next film comes out as Mallrats, and um, like I enjoyed Mallrats, I did, but Clerks kind of set it up for me. And I'm sure I'm not just saying this because you would
No,
interview Kevin
it's
Smith.
fine.
He's
It's
he was
fine.
he was one of the he was one of the first filmmakers. Not that I didn't know him at the time. I just knew the film Clerks. So after that, when I actually started getting into filmmaking, I rediscovered the movie El Mariachi, and I watched that years ago again. But I discovered Robert Rodriguez online, writing these articles saying these things about just get out there and make your film, and if you don't got a cameraman, that's fine, figure it out. And then I read that I heard that he read a book. He wrote a book, and so I bought his. Oh, now I just went blank on his book. I have it somewhere.
It's okay.
Um,
We're not factually we fact check way later, sir. So it's fine.
Robert Rodriguez's book, Rebel Without a Crew. That's what it's called.
Okay.
So I read that book and lots of gold information that just really stood out to me that I took. The other person was obviously at the time Quentin Tarantino, Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction. I remember that was a huge influence on a
Yeah.
lot of my friends. And it was I guess that trifecta of filmmakers at the time that really stood out to me. And that sounds like kind of cliche because that's a cliche thing to say right now. But at the time when I started to get into film, when I started researching it, those were the three big names. Me coming up, whose films I always enjoyed watching. I remember seeing Desperado like years ago again after, and that was Rodriguez's second film or his first. Was it his first official studio film
Well,
release?
yeah, because isn't
Um,
it based on El
yeah,
Mariachi?
Yeah, it's pretty much he says it's kind of the spiritual sequel, but it was pretty much I heard him say in an interview. I could be wrong. Someone's listening to the podcast now,
That's
so
fine.
he didn't say that,
They'll nail us
but
in
I
the
swear he
comments.
said we just made the same film with a bigger budget.
Yeah, yeah.
So the stuff he wanted to do, yeah.
That's
So he's just
exactly what that
it's a
is.
spiritual successor.
I got more money for two more acts.
Yeah. So he's like, I'll go make that. So, but I like even Kevin Smith's films like so he made Mallrats and he played then he made oh
Chasing
why am
Amy.
I drawing a blank here? I knew oh, Chasing Amy was the other one. Yes, so there was like that one, and then the other one, the next one after that. So I watched like all his films. Right, it was just at the time I didn't realize where that was leading me to, but that was something I sort of grew up with. That sounds kind of when I think back because it's so cliche. Everyone says, "Oh, Kevin Smith, Robert Rodriguez, and Tarantino." So yeah, of course, yes. Like for me, like yeah, of course, those are the people of our time. Like at the generation, especially when I was getting into film, they were still the big names. I mean, now it's Chris Nolan. Um, who's the other big ones?
Well,
The
J.J.
Russo brothers right
Abrams,
now
Chris
because of the
Nolan,
Avengers.
yeah, like Russo brothers, everybody, everything's a blockbuster now. Where you're talking like Tarantino, Rodriguez, and Smith are both filmmakers. Not everything they make is off the wall, but like it really is. They're in the art of filmmaking where J.J. Abrams and the Russo and all these other aforementioned people, they're in the world making business. They're making something that's like an escape where the stuff, and I agree with you about Kevin Smith and Rodriguez and Tarantino. I mean, my first true cops and robbers movie is Reservoir Dogs. Like that's where I hold a lot. That's my measuring stick for a good cops and robbers movie. And with Tarantino just being crazy, Kevin Smith being experimental and having the balls to just leave film school, like his story, and then go out and rack up credit card debt to make what he's making. I can see your love of those three guys and everything I've watched by you. I can. It's definitely evidently there. Um,
For sure, thank you. But I did want to continue. I did want
yeah,
to say
yeah,
this
yeah.
before I get into it because that's the cliche, and I didn't finish that story. Sorry, Michael.
So no, that's fine. Go on,
Um,
go on.
as I grew as a filmmaker, I discovered other films, and I started watching older films, and I started watching foreign films, and a lot of my filmmakers now, who I consider probably my top four, I'll say top five. So, this is the one film that I discovered. It's my number one on my list, and the director is number one on my list, and it's everything I learned about filmmaking. So after I got into it and I started actually studying film, like on my own and researching it and watching more movies and watching more documentaries and reading as many articles as I could and as many books that I can actually finish reading. Um, Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai. Everything I learned
Ah,
about filmmaking, I learned from Seven Samurai. And then I used to say that, and then someone, I don't know, maybe someone heard my quote and made it into a book, but it became, someone used that title. And of course, I'm kidding. I don't know who the author is at all, but someone wrote a book called that, and I was like, "Oh man, someone stole my quote."
fuck
Now I
them.
can't. Now they're gonna think I'm stealing it. but but Seven Samurai, I watched that film, then I listened to the commentary, and then I watched it again. Then I studied it, and I was like, "Wow, the imagery, the metaphors, the photography, the storytelling, everything like that just really stood out to me." And Akira Kurosawa's film library was just extensive, influential, and I don't know if a lot of your listeners know that obviously the Hidden Fortress was a huge influence on George Lucas's Star Wars. and his Yojimbo and um, the samurai series was a huge influence on the man with no name with Clint Eastwood.
Yes, no, definitely. I know
Yeah,
that. I didn't
yeah.
know Star Wars, but I did know the man with no name for the Clint Eastwood, the good, the bad, the ugly series was. It's just putting revolvers and ponchos and cowboy hats on people and taking off kimonos and katanas. Like you're just replacing the clothing, but that story is identical. I couldn't agree with you more.
Well, so from there, I was going to tell you, in my film, The Maintenance Man, there's an image in not Sanjay, Yojimbo, where the samurai is facing, well, the samurai with no name, I guess we can call him, Yojimbo, is facing the bad guys, and there's this wind that comes up behind him, and there's that image of like there's this huge storm behind him, and that's an image for like his wrath, I guess. We'll just say, for lack of a better term, it could be his anger or his
Okay.
fury. Um, but there was that small image, but there it was just the metaphor of the Akira Kurosawa used that in the Maintenance Man. There's a scene that I use, and it was when my maintenance man was standing there, and then the leaves kind of blow around him
Yep.
after he sees the girl.
Yeah.
So I used that, and I knew I used that. I'm saying it now because I know at the time people were like, the crew was like, "What are you doing? Like, why do we keep like doing this scene?" And I'm like, there's a certain pattern I need to try and get from it, anyways. But it's in the film. Now that you've saw it, but that's
I
kind of
know
the scene
exactly
that
what
I
you're
was.
talking about now. Like I thought the main I loved it. I'm getting into
Thank you.
short film. I'm getting into more film making and not movie making. And so everything is new to me, so I'm trying to be as much of a sponge and look at it looking at it through metaphor, looking at it through a simile, looking at it through a different storytelling, what adventure we're trying to tell, what's the subplot, what's the subtext, all those big words. I'm trying to get better at, but I really did the way you created menace and anger silently inside of Wob in that was I was glued to that, and I was like, I got really angry. I got really angry when that guy, like when she came out the second time and she had gotten hit. I was like, motherfucker, like that shit really, and it was quick and it was easy, and there's a lot there with not a lot going on, and I was very impressed by that.
Thank you, and I obviously have to give a lot of props to my actors, and Maintenance Man, and we can talk about that later on. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
before we get more into that. I did want to finish up. I'll just really
Oh,
quick
sorry, I'm
some
cutting
with
you
the other
off.
directors.
Bad
The other
interviewer. Bad
directors that I
interview.
influenced. That it wasn't just a trifecta cliche filmmakers.
Okay, okay.
Kevin Smith, Robert Rodriguez, and Quentin Tarantino. It was actually now my filmmakers are my top filmmakers. I think right now are not. I think, but they are Akira Kurosawa, number one. I love all those films. Great storyteller. I think he's a great influential figure on my directing. Um, Werner Herzog, I love his
Ah,
documentaries.
yes.
I really applied a lot of I think you watched one of my documentaries. I applied a lot of his teachings into my documentary storytelling.
Yes.
Um, Takeshi Kitano and Takeshi Miike, they're two Japanese directors, but Sonatine was the other one. Oh, I'll probably get the name wrong. And then the Dead or Alive trilogy series, like Audition. Takeshi Miike made that film. It's a Japanese horror film. Um, and also now is like David Fincher is probably my most modern uh, director, one of my top five directors. So there you go. So I didn't just it wasn't just what I started. It wasn't just the cliche trifecta of directors who influenced me. Now there was a lot of other directors that I really enjoyed. I got a top 10, but for now, those are my top five.
Perfect. No, and I get it. I totally get it. Like you get something easy, something cheesy, something fun in Quentin Tarantino, bloody and full of action, right? Like I know why they pull you in, but then to just stay stagnant and not explore other directors and other filmmakers and other genres and other parts of the world, right? To get outside of North America,
Mm.
most people don't think that. Like I'm very new to getting into foreign film myself, if we're being honest here. So I'm not going to pretend that I've got this extensive catalog to pull from. But I'm enjoying it more often than I'm enjoying it more than I thought I would because I got sucked into the hole. But my point is that if you don't grow, like totally fine to be sucked in by Kevin Smith and Quentin Tarantino and Robin Rodriguez. But 30 years later, it's not good to still be sucked in by Quentin Tarantino, Kevin Smith, and Robert Rodriguez. You've missed a ton of opportunity to learn and expand. So yes, it's very mature of you, Roger.
Well, thank you. And there are a lot of great storytellers all over the world, and I think that's the one thing is that watching foreign films, and I try to watch a lot of, look, I watch a lot of. I think I just did a podcast with James on
Oh boy.
Never Does Movies,
Oh
and
boy.
we were talking Veloso Preacher,
Yes.
Veloso Pastor.
Yes.
Okay, I watch films like that, and I'm like, okay. I think that we were discussing other crazy. Velocipaster was another. Maybe wait. Maybe I didn't do a podcast. I apologize, James, if you're listening. That I'm getting my films mixed up. Well, we just watched a crazy. Um, I think it's called. And correct. I apologize if this is the correct term. Japanese exploitation was one of the films, and it was like Robo Geisha, like it was called.
Oh God.
So I watch films like that. What I was trying to say is I watch films like that. I watch horror films. I watch 70s horror films. I watch like obviously old American action films from the 90s. Hey, Samurai Cop was awesome. Um, but I also watch like obviously I watched a lot of the award-winning films. I watched a lot of foreign films. I try to watch French films and Norwegian films and like South Korean films, Japanese and Chinese films. Are films I've been watching over the last 10 years, the last decade. I always try to watch more. So I don't just try and just have like, oh, I need to watch Transformers 8 or whatever came out. I don't need to, like don't get me wrong, I love Avengers, but it's like, and I love Chris Nolan's films and storytelling, but I'm not sitting going like, yeah, Chris Nolan, like he is a great filmmaker, but that's not just who influences me. So I grew. I feel like I've grown as a filmmaker, not just the locals or the cliches.
Fair enough.
That's what
No,
I should. The cliches is what
yeah.
I meant. Yeah.
It's evident from a person who's watched your stuff. So if you're hoping that comes across the screen, it does 100-fold. When coming up with a new idea, how do you find inspiration for what you make? Like I know you said it's instinctual that you picked up the camera and the technical aspects, the heavy lifting of it, but the creative side, where did stories like Maintenance Man, for example, does that just strike you? Do you see it somewhere? Is it a conversation? Where are you finding your muse?
A lot of as I grew as I'm growing as a filmmaker, some of my films are inspired by real life. A lot of them are experiences. The Maintenance Man. What can I say about that? It was just it was an idea I had about what would it. Uh, and I'm trying to like obviously when I made the Maintenance Man, I was a lot younger. I was getting into it, and what is it if someone can step into someone's life and help them? That's kind of
Yeah.
the point, the idea behind that. Like, what does that mean? And someone who's trying to find their redemption, like I will tell you this about the backstory. I'm trying to. There's an image in another film that I'm trying to remember. Okay, Seventh Seal. Remember that name. So
Okay. All right.
okay, so um, and it was inspired by 3 or 4 films. Just the images in that film, but the idea behind that was the backstory that I had told my actor Wob was you had done something really bad. Your character was really drunk. Your character did something really bad. This is why he went to jail, and the backstory is he had hurt his ex, and he through time, through healing, he's come to realize that that wasn't who he was, and he tried to heal from that. And now you're getting out of jail, and you are just want to live a quiet life, and you're trying to find redemption because you want to feel like that you did something really bad, but you grew out of that. You're trying to become a better person, and for him internally, there's a certain redemption that he wants to try and find. So when he moves in this apartment building, and he sees this other guy, obviously, and he meets this woman that he has a connection with in the building. Then they just he's able to find his redemption. I hope that's making sense.
Yeah, no.
But in the
I 100% saw that in the film. That's what I wanted to make a critique of that. Well, not critique, but just a comment that I love a redemption story. I love an underdog. I love a guy who's hard on his luck in some sort of situation. Specifically, I do love it when they get out of prison and they're trying to be better, because that that in society, like if you're an ex-con, like you're labeled pretty
Mhm.
hard,
Mhm.
and so that's not the easiest place to come from. So I love that backstory for the character about it. But no, it makes perfect sense. So that's coming from like, is that like, was that a, I don't want to draw too deep into your backstory, but was that a personal situation?
No,
That
it was just not personal experience, but it was definitely inspired by things I've seen and people
okay.
I've known, and and ideas I get. And that's not like it didn't that wasn't like you know step by step. This is what happened. Someone. It was just obviously a lot of stories come from people I grew up with. They're inspired by people I grew up with, good or bad, and they're influenced by even just my own personal experiences. I'll move. I'll well, we can talk about Hockey Dad next, but I kind of just finished the
Yeah, yeah.
Maintenance Man was uh, that's kind of where the idea was, and so I started putting that together, that redemption story, and a lot of the images were inspired by. Obviously, I said Seven Samurai. There was a scene there. Old Boy, Chan Wook Mook's
Oh, oh, I love
Chan
old.
Wook Park's Old Boy.
I love
Yeah, the
Old
original
Boy.
Old Boy, not the Spike Lee one. Yeah, actually, you can see it behind me there.
I've seen both of them. I did give myself the opportunity to watch the new one and was like, yeah, okay. I mean, whatever. You had to do what you had to do to put people in the seats. But the original is one of the craziest stories you could ever. If you haven't seen Old
Very
Boy,
visceral. Yes, for listeners out there, I can understand that if you've never seen the original Old Boy and you watch Spike Lee's version, you might be like, "Wow, that's so crazy," like. But if you watch the original and you've seen the original the first time, that story. I always say this, Michael, is that if I could ever make a film as good as Old Boy, I'll just stop filmmaking. Honestly,
okay.
I'll go back to construction, or I'll go back to become a truck driver, or whatever. Like I'll just stop making films.
All right.
But
I'll
if
hold
I
you
can
to
ever
that.
make a film as visceral and good as Old Boy,
I'll be like,
so
I'll
those,
if I see that film, if you make that film, I'll just come over to you and I'll be like, Old Boy. I'll whisper it in your ear and I'll walk away, and then you'll know.
I'll be like, oh well, that's it for me, guys. I'm retiring. Thank you. Um, but there's that scene. The hammer is obviously from that scene from because I thought, hey, what could he
Yes.
use? And I was inspired
Yeah.
by Old Boy, so he has a hammer in Maintenance Man. Um, there was another film um, that inspired that, and that was Seventh Seal. So in Seventh Seal, the character, and I hope I'm not reading these films for you.
No, no, no.
Um, uh, in the Seventh Seal, the character has a chess game with death. So, and I just thought that was such a philosophical idea that my character in Maintenance Man, and no one ever asked me like, who's he playing chess with?
He's playing
It's
chess with
just the
himself.
chess board moving, and then that was the thing. But he's playing chess metaphorically with the bad side of him,
Yeah.
and at the end
Okay.
of it,
Okay. That's what I was gonna bring that up. I'm glad you brought that up. I loved it when he like toppled over, like he walked by the chessboard and was like just made the move, because that's it. That's one of those like silent omissions, right? Like you've got a character who's coming out of prison but yet knows chess. Usually you get a lot of time in prison, so he spent time trying to better himself, try to become smarter, because chess is a game for people who use their brain. So I love that there was that little nuance of like, oh, he's a chess player. Like it gave your character more depth, and it made you understand who he was as a person with just a quick 2-second shot. And you didn't have to get too complex. And it's a short film, so you don't have a lot of time. So it's a great way to be like, oh, there's more to this guy than just, a maintenance man.
yeah. So, I mean, obviously, I put a lot of those things, those ideas in there, but in my film. And Maintenance Man, I will say about this, was my first film that I actually had a budget. So the previous films that I told you about, Rentless and 210, were just made with whatever. Maintenance Man, I had a budget, so I got a Winnipeg Film Group. It was called. It was a grant, but it was like
Yeah.
a first film. First film fund grant. It was called. So I was able to. Actually, one of the people who helped me was one of your guests, I believe, Shelly.
Shelly Anthus,
She
yes.
helped me on there. Yes.
You're all great. All you film people in Winnipeg are the best fucking people on the planet. That's the whole purpose of this, man, is that
Yeah.
like there's a small pocket of stupid great creative geniuses in the province of Manitoba with great film tax credits and great places for lots of different locations that not a lot of people outside of I know the industry knows about it, but not a lot of people outside of the industry go, oh, Manitoba. They go Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal. Well, fuck you, everybody. Manitoba's the
Yeah.
shit, and that's the purpose. So back to you.
Yeah, no, Winnipeg does have a lot of Manitoba itself has a lot of creative individuals, but unfortunately, the people that always get promoted or seen are they're either in Toronto or Vancouver or
Yeah.
Montreal. So it's unfortunate. Where we have a lot of great talented filmmakers here, and they don't always get their due, but they will. That's something we could talk about that I've been trying to help, especially for Indigenous filmmakers for myself.
Yes, I
Coming
want
up, but
that to be a big part of the show, so we can let's rifle through some of the more just who you are stuff here. Um, do
yeah,
you
sorry.
go
You
ahead?
did ask me your first question. I did want to follow up with the hockey dad. So that
Yes.
was inspired by. So we went from the maintenance man. Hockey dad was inspired by my niece being born.
Oh,
So obviously that was my niece, but I changed it to it was a father and a mother I was fighting, and despite what his wife thinks about him, he still has the love of his daughter in the film. So,
it
so no
was
matter how bad he is, it was. So that was it. So you ask like where my stories and ideas come from. They're
yeah.
always inspired by someone I know or just personal experiences. But I've yet to put a well, I shouldn't say I've yet to, um, because I keep it. I'm pretty coy. But I try to be pretty coy about it. But like there's filmmakers who 100% put their experiences on screen and they make really great films. Um, but I haven't 100%. I've taken inspiration from my life and personal experiences.
Well,
But
that's really interesting to know where that personal experience comes from because it reads on screen that it would look like a dad, uh, and he's a hockey fan and wanting his daughter to follow in his footsteps and think it's as cool as dad thinks, and then you get this big bait and switch where what's happening between the father and the daughter gets even more dramatic when the mother comes in, and I was like, that's cool. I thought that was really neat because you were leading the audience member down a path where you're like, oh, this is a relationship about them. No, it's actually about the angry parents, and I'm from a divorced family, so as soon as I saw that, I was like, I know what that feels like at a soccer game. Like that is a definite. I emoted with that, but I like how it's your niece was born. How do you take that feeling and tell it on screen without telling the entire story? Like you say, you want to be inspired. You don't want to tell the whole shebang. You don't want to put it on screen per se.
yes. So
That's
and yeah, and then yeah, and it's just the idea was trying to be behind it. I think I know one of the ideas was no matter how bad. How do I say that? How did I say this again? I'm trying to remember. It's been so long since hockey. That was my second film that I actually got a budget for, and it probably showed. But I mean, Hockey Dad was no matter how terrible that this mother or this person thinks the father is, like um, he's a good dad.
yeah.
He's a good person, and so he can have nothing else, but he has that.
No, that
So
was yeah. I liked that. I got a soft spot in my heart for troubled families coming from one and all that. So well done. Tear in the eye. When
thanks.
you when you do when you get on set, you've written, like, are you really script oriented, or do you kind of step outside and let actors improv a little bit, or are you by the page?
I that's the one thing too. Like I guess I always consider myself lucky for not working with actors right away, like actual actors. I always work with my friends. Like even Maintenance Man was actually just friends of mine, right?
Yeah.
Um, Wob before before obviously we know Wob now as a political leader.
Yes.
Um, um, and then Jessica also was a local model, but she lives. I think she moved to Vancouver. Um, I did want to say quickly because we're talking
Yes,
about Maintenance
please.
Man and Will, my friend has recently passed, so um, just want to give my condolences to his family. But he was a really he never acted before, and I do want to say that Will was probably stood out to a lot of people um, in his ability. And I always encourage him to continue acting, but he went his own way of life, and um, yeah, but he did a really good job there, and a lot of people were really inspired by him. But there you
Yeah,
go.
no,
I
he
think
was
that's
he made me not like him. That's for sure.
yeah. So, and he was a really good guy. So for someone with no acting experience, he was able to give that performance, and I was trying to encourage him and. like even Wob and Jessica at the time, and like they just everyone goes their own way of life,
Totally.
and that's totally fine. But with that being said, I would think I got into the hockey dad. Got onto the hockey dad. I got into the film Hockey Dad, so I was able to actually go through a casting process, and I went through a casting process with my friend Shelly. She knew how to go do all that, and that's where my fear was, and I had to get over my fear of casting actors. So I was, yeah, Shelly was like, I was like, no, how about I'll just ask one of my friends, and what I'm used to, right?
Yeah.
What's been working for me. And she says, no, let's cast. I'll help you. And I was like, okay, sure. So I'm happy she did, and I'm very thankful she did because we cast some really good actors in Hockey Dad, and they come with their ideas. How it approaches is, obviously you have people setting. If you have a good assistant director and a production manager, they all do all the work for you. My job is to, at least this is what I'm learning now. I mean, the more bigger budgets we get to, and we can get to later on what I'm working on in the future. But you have people doing these jobs. I don't have to do everything myself. You know what I mean? So I would just show up on Hockey Dad, especially. I showed up and I kind of had an idea. I walked through that week. I talked with my director of photography, and we just kind of talked about the shots, kind of what we're going for. Had a shot list, and then I had to work with the actors, and the actors knew all their lines, and they knew kind of. I told them the ideas behind it, the backstory, and I told the backstory to the actor. I believe I did. I hope I did. I'm saying that now. He'll be, and if he ever listens to this, he'll be like, "You never told me that backstory." But I hope I did. But you kind of have an idea of like what I've learned about actors, like professional working with professional actors, is I have two approaches. One is, I guess, they just, as long as they learn their lines, they ask me questions, I can ask that, but I should have a backstory for them so they have motivation. And this is where you get to like, what's my motivation? What's that? But it's just like, what's my goal? And like, the actor is just coming like, why would I do this? Is pretty much what they're saying. Why would I do this? That's, so you have to have an answer for them. And hopefully, if you understand your story deep enough and you have a good backstory for them, then you just have to tell the actors this is why you do this, and they say, okay, I get it. Or you might take a little bit more process to it, but a lot of it is to casting the right actor for the right role. And my approach as directing is, when we're on set, we kind of walk through we walk through the scene. They say their lines. They say, okay, let's roll, and I don't say nothing. And this is just how I've grown to become more of a director. I let the actors kind of not figure it out. If I cast them for a reason, and they bring something to it. And then we would just adjust the performance, and little less of this, little less of that. I like what you're doing here. Or sometimes you just, like, hey, I need you to do this for this reason. You have to explain to them. And I say that now, and I'm sure my actors will be like, yeah, right, that's not how he directs. But this is what I'm learning as I'm growing as a filmmaker. And if you're not making mistakes, you're not growing. But I've really gotten I've tried to get in the habit of letting my actors go through the scene, and then I'm like, okay, I like that, or I don't like that, and then we talk about it after. That's kind of my process. But having a backstory and casting the right actors for the right roles, I think would be the first step. Of course, I'm saying that now, and it's like, you'll see one of my films, and I'll be just using my friends again, because it's like I can't. Yeah, it's just like I just want to make a film with my friends, and none of my friends are actors, so.
But
Um,
essentially, aren't you like you're casting what you want? You're not casting a trained actor. Let's be frank. They're not trained actors. But like you're getting what you want because you see something that you like. So technically speaking, it just all comes out in the wash the same way. You're just not going through somebody picking it. But I think that's cool. Like I don't. I'm not on set. I don't know these things. That's why I like asking them, because I'm a fan as much as I'm, trying to, let have a platform to talk about this. But is it? I wouldn't imagine it's common to be like, do your thing and then we'll talk. Where mostly it's like they've auditioned, they're there for a reason. So I imagine the director would just be like, I want this. We're doing it this way. Where you're like, yeah, have some fun, stretch it out, see what it does. Like that's pretty neat environment to set up for an actor, I would imagine.
as long as you are getting your shots, I think, in the year you've probably talked about it beforehand, and you cast the right actor. I mean, there'd be time to play. But I'm very lucky that I kind of, not that I say I wouldn't run those challenges, because I have totally. Um, but just having a plan. The more prepared I am, especially mentally, like that sounds so. You write something out usually and have a plan with your actors beforehand. You have to have a plan with everyone. The better you plan, the less, I guess, the better opportunity you'll have to play if something's not working. But it's also like knowing that your actor can ad lib on something. There's been instances where I'm like, that line isn't working. It's not working. Where it's not. There's something. There's not the beat isn't working for me. The pace isn't working for me. Can we say something else? So we start like, can maybe say this, maybe say that, and they would say, well, how about I try this or how about I try that, and then you discover something in that moment. And yeah, it's just sometimes like you just play. I mean, you just let the actor play and come out, and you find that truth in the scene. That sounds so. Well, every time I say that, I
No,
sound like I'm
don't.
being a cliche director, but I mean, that's just it. I mean, sometimes and that's when you get to that moment of you see that's magic. I mean, that's when they say that that's real acting, when you believe that person is that person, and they're being honest in that scene, and they're letting it out, and that's something that a good actor can find, and or you can help the actor find that, and that's my job as a director, is just trying to find that. And um, but it's also trying to navigate the actor's questions and saying, why would I do that? Why would my actor character do this? Why would my character walk up the stairs when I know there's a scary monster running around here? You have to have a reason for them.
Yeah, no, I get it. Like, because if it's your vision without a backstory, without those baby steps to help them get close enough to the character, yeah, no, that can be a shit show.
Yeah, and I've gotten used to working with, like, I'm getting more better. Like over the years, I've worked with non-actors, and that's how I come up with work with non-actors, because I didn't want to work with actors, because I always considered myself as well, I'm just making films. Well, why would a trained actor want to work with me? I'm just trying to make films with my friends. But then I realized, oh, actors need experience, so that's why they want to work with you. And I do want to. Still make films here and there, but I always try to give my actors and filmmakers something. Obviously I feed all my actors and my crew, but because I don't you don't always get budgets, but I don't want to get I make my films. If I got to be the cameraman and do everything, fine, But that's how much I enjoy filmmaking. So
Oh, excuse me, hang
just trying to get your storytelling down. Yeah. If I waited for funding, I would have only made Hockey Dad and The Maintenance Man.
on. Excuse me, sorry about that.
Okay.
That's smoke down the wrong lung. Ugh, new vaporizer. So my apologies. I should have tested it before we started recording. No, I think I dig that. That makes me smile, sir, in a lot of ways. Um, one more thing before we kind of get into the bulk of what I watched and what I wanted the people to learn about some of the things and where they can watch it too. What's the hardest artistic choice you have to make when you're making one of your films? Like, are you where do you find where you because you've got to cut something unless you're Alfred Hitchcock, which means you shoot exactly what you need and that is it and nothing else. But I imagine Alfred Hitchcock only did that, the story I know goes, because he didn't like the studio interfering, so they couldn't take anything out that wasn't extra. He didn't give extra, but I imagine you're like, let's do it this way, let's do it that way, let's block it this way, let's light it that way, right? So like, where do you find the hardest thing about chopping it up and getting it to its final product?
There's a saying in that all filmmakers that should know, and if they're just getting into it, they'll learn this. Is that the saying is called "You kill your babies," which sounds terrible, but you do not be afraid. You do not be afraid to cut the things that you love the most to make the film work.
Okay.
So, there are things that I've had to cut, entire scenes that I just realized I don't need that. Like, and we spent some time on that. I'm trying to think. There's a couple. Was it The Maintenance Man had a scene that I just like? Nope, don't need that. Maybe Hockey Dad might have had something in there, but I was like, no, I don't need that. Um, there's a couple other, like, I'm just trying to think but there's been times that we've done that. You just have to be like, I wanted that shot from above, but I can't afford a crane, so it's like, oh man, you know.
No, yeah, I get it.
So
I
you
oh,
just
yeah.
that's what you have to, and you have to learn that. And what I'm even learning right now, so like, I'll be making a feature film next year, and right now trying to get to that next level of filmmaking. I mean, I'm talking like a professionally paid director, but maybe I am, or I'm just talking like who the hell is this guy? But I'm trying to get to that level of becoming making this a consistent career. And like even now, this film that I'm making, I told my producer, and I'm working with a screenwriter, like, do not be afraid to tell me, for me to grow. Do not be afraid to tell me if it's terrible. And so they're pretty honest with me. And then I'm like, oh
Yeah.
man, I thought I was good, but I guess it's getting over that hurdle. And I'm like, oh, I thought I was decent, but I guess I'm not, because they obviously and they've read and they've worked with people at a higher level than I have. So I'll put it that way. And they just, when you hear someone say, well, your lines are kind of terrible, I'm like, oh, like, okay, but that's okay, because for me, I have to get over that hurdle of, um, I guess, embarrassing myself to become better at it. And
Yeah.
I
That's
always harken
natural.
back to, I always harken this back to hockey. The first time, I'll quickly digress to this quick story, but it feeds into the philosophy of me having to grow
Please.
to become a
Please.
better person. Was the first time I went out to one of my a gym to play floor hockey. So I started playing floor hockey. I picked up a hockey stick. It made sense. I never was put into ice hockey when I was younger, so I had to kind of, again, self-taught, right? But I picked up a hockey stick, and it just made sense. So I played ball hockey at probably our top level in Manitoba for a few years. But prior to that, when I first started playing, like on drop-in hockey, the very first time I went to this gym, um, they put people against the wall to pick teams. So they pick some captains, and then they go like, okay, you pick one, you pick two, and they pick teams, right? So captain one goes take that guy, captain two take that guy, and it just went on and on and on. So all the players on the wall soon went to join their teams, and it came down to the last pick. This last guy, he was like, okay, he looked at the other guy, and there's myself, and this other guy standing there, and this is a true story. He um he looks at me, he looks at the other guy, and he goes, I'll take him. So he picked the other guy, and I was like, oh man, I'm last.
Oh,
But I thought I was last. The guy running the gym was like, okay, let's all play. I was a no pick. They just started playing and ignored me. um so I was like, wow, okay, it's like that, I guess. So I kind of went and sat down, and I was like, damn, like,
that's
I didn't even get
horrible.
picked. Yes, and that this is a true story. But I figured, you know what? I'll stick around. If one of the teams needs a player, I'll just play. I came here for a reason. So eventually, I did play a couple games that night, and I just stuck with it. And I will say, like, as from that gym that I was at, a few years later, we formed a team. We were last, uh, and we just kept practicing. We kept working at it. I kept practicing. I kept working at it. I kept learning from the better people around me, um, to the point where we our team had set a record at the time. So you play 16 games in a season for a ball hockey season. So in our winter league, we set a record, and we have 16 games a season, and we were the first team to go 16-0 in the regular season. We were the first team to have, I think, over 200 goals in 16 games. So that's average of like 12 goals a game or something. My math could be off of that, but we had around 12, average 12 goals for, by our team. And we had, I
That's
think we were
nuts.
the only team to have three players with over 90 points. So myself and my two other superstar teammates, both set records for goals and assists. And I was lucky to be on a team with them. Um, but that, when I retired, quote unquote, retired from competitive hockey, and I always regret, because I didn't have any coaches. I always look back at my hockey career and go like, I could have done a lot better. It just, I was not focused where I should have been, and I could have played at a higher level than I ever did, because it was just working, learning and working. Um, but when I retired, my friend put our name on the wall, and it wasn't like a big official ceremony retire. It was just like, hey guys, I'm gonna start focusing on
That's
work and
awesome
all
though.
this, and stop doing that. When I left the team, I was the captain. So
That's
uh,
like that's a that's the definition of putting in work and seeing what comes out of it. 100%.
so the whole point of that was, you know, yeah, if I want to play at a higher level of script writing and filmmaking, I need to surround myself with the right people, and I need
Yeah.
to risk. embarrassing myself in my terrible writing, that I have to actually get better at it and hear honest feedback from people who have no stake in my career, I guess you can say. But be honest, I guess, with my career, and just know that I can get better and know what the area I'm going in. Like, this is my career now. It's not ball hockey. Like, ball hockey was, so a part of my life years ago. Which is actually, hockey dad was ball hockey. The player
Yeah, it
played ball
was. Yeah,
hockey.
I saw because he was playing with a ball. I caught that. I
Yeah.
was like ball hockey. Yeah, no, I remember playing ball hockey when I was a Cub Scout for like years in a church basement in North Kildonan in Winnipeg. Like ball hockey and my shins have a very long sordid history of playing without goalie pads and trying to pretend I was Bob Essenza at like 9 years old. No, I have a romance with ball hockey too. I get it, but I love that story. Like that's like it is like, not to get all cliche like you said, and not to get all like Hallmark, but like that's just concrete shit, man. That's just doing something, getting better at it, being able to be critiqued, being able to told, it's not that you're not good. It's just you're not doing this well. You can do it better, and yeah, that's exactly how someone's gonna walk up to you one day and say "old boy" in your ear, and then you'll know, right? Like that's see how I brought
Thanks.
that back. See how I brought that back.
Yeah, I see
Um,
what you did there.
so I want to move into some of your film stuff here, and then talk about some of the boards that you're on, and some of the initiatives that you're about to, because I want noise to be made about that stuff. But what I watched and loved, and the first one is your most recent one, The Wolf You Did, which is on Instagram. And one of our guys, Jimmy Skinner, is getting me back into horror, and so I'm like, give me all the horror, give me all the paranormal. I love it. So I I watched the whole thing. I didn't, because I was watching it on my MacBook, not on my phone. So I just started watching it, and then looked over and was like, "Oh, you shot that on an iPhone." And I was blown away that I thought that was all like that's how well that was. And then you put like, I love the filter of the old VCR found footage aspect. Please tell people what this movie's about, because then it'll make more sense. But I loved it. I was like, this is the perfect amount of cheese in this kind of story. But yeah.
For sure. Well, I will tell you, I appreciate that, and thank you for watching it. And I appreciate your words, your kind words, your unkind words. I don't know, but your kind words I appreciate. Um, I've had the idea for a long time. I think it was again at a downtime that I wasn't doing anything, and one of my actors from The Spider, Amran, we were talking about stuff.
He's
I said, "Hey, we should."
hilarious. He's
Yeah, I
hilarious.
was like, we should make, and he is actually a funny guy, and I don't know if he's still acting, but like I'm sure he still does stuff, but I know he's working right now, and we were talking about it back in the wintertime, and I just thought, hey, I've been wanting to use this app on my iPhone, and I want to make a film on my iPhone, and I want to make it as a found footage film, and so we come up with me and him came up with an idea. This guy is trying to get pictures of some wolf in the countryside, and he's with his camera person, so. Um, I just figured, like, why don't you meet a werewolf? And I'm like, how can I do that? And I always thought it'll just be a silhouette of a werewolf. We won't see the werewolf. And you kind of do in the film, because he's like, hey, my cousin has and actually I still have his wolf mask. I got to give it back to him. But he said, my cousin has a werewolf head. We should do that. I was like, sure. And so I asked one of my other friends, filmmaker friends, Cody, and Cody's really tall. So I just thought, hey, Cody, would we want to be a werewolf in this thing? He's like, sure. And then I have helped Cody also. I've helped him make his film. And that's the film you should check out also. Remains Human, it's called. It'll be on YouTube.
Nice.
But I helped him make his film, and he won just, I guess, digressing really quick. Cody won an emerging film award for his Remains Human film, so good for him. But he came out, and he was the wolf. And I tried to, again, just figuring things out. I borrowed a work light from my friend Laven. Um, I wrote the script, and I just said, we're not gonna. Here's the script. It's our template. But I know what this is, and we're just filming it. And again, I got one of my other actresses was in town. Morgan, she was in town, and I said, "Hey, are you in town? Like, do you have a couple hours that we help me film something?" She was sure. I will tell you this: the wolf is. I filmed Morgan and I filmed Amron's scenes totally separate. They were never in the same
Really?
place at the same time. I just did all that. I edited everything together. Yeah.
I
So
fell for it then. I really thought that you had them. First of all, what you did with them, like their exchange, they're like, because I the character that you gave him, which is the unaware buffoon,
yeah.
the guy who has the big ego and is completely unaware of how unprepared he is. That is one of my favorite characters to watch on screen because it's always comedic no matter what. And then her just giving him shit about how big of an idiot he is, asking for gas money, like all those little quips. I was like, this is hilarious. Like this is and then I was like, you did this in 48 hours? Like was that for a 48 film festival that you did that for?
No, it was just something that I wanted to get out and film something, and I was like, again, I just had the time, and I said I filmed it all together in 48 hours. So it was like maybe I put an hour into the script, and then me
Okay.
and Amron, I think,
Okay,
went out
okay,
for a
okay.
couple hours to kind of walk through the whole area. So we did, and we came up with some ideas, and then I got everything together. So with that, another couple of hours, and then I shot probably about 4 hours. I shot all his scenes, and then I took it back. I put it all together on my computer. Then I figured out, okay, I now I need to film the person, and then, I was trying to get a couple of other people I knew, but Morgan was available, and she had agreed. So again, 3 hours I shot her film. Then I brought everything back, and I just gave her the lines. I said, "This is what you'd say." Again, we just walking through. I work with them. The good thing is I work with them, so they were both familiar with my style, and but it's also like I trusted them enough to be like, what do you think? Like, what are your ideas?
Yeah.
And I was comfortable enough with them to make this, and they were both pretty. I don't say they're gung ho. I just felt like they're doing me a favor, but they were pretty happy with it. I bought them coffee. I bought everyone coffee. So, and by the time I put everything together in the app, I mean, by the time I downloaded everything, yeah, and I put it all together, I was done, and that altogether is about 48 hours. So if I
It's
was doing a 48-hour film, that's what I would have came up with. So
I was yeah, I loved it. I saved it for like I literally went in order of like how you sent it to me. So we went from like some of your older stuff, which I want to tie back to Hockey Dad. What I thought was cool, and I forgot to mention earlier, and I don't because it's your niece, maybe it was accidental, but did any like Hockey Dad and daughter not a common trope, right? Not like if we're talking hockey, and we've
mhm.
seen all the commercials and Nike ads and whatnot for hockey, it's usually a very masculine thing. So I thought it was very cool that the daughter and the dad were at the rink together because that's not a common thing, and we need to start showing not common things on screen because they're common in real life.
Definitely, and I think it. I wasn't thinking about it at the time because usually it'd be it's the father and the son who were there, but I just thought being inspired by my niece, that was a huge part of it. So again, I hope that probably comes out in the storytelling, why I did that. So, but yeah, at the time I wasn't. That wasn't actually it wasn't on my mind. I was thinking, Tim Hortons hasn't done this, like so.
Nice. Hey
Yeah,
man,
so
whatever. However it
it was a
comes out.
natural flow, I guess. It was authentic, I guess, as much as I can say. So
I really wanted to talk about your most recent project, which was Lost Moccasin, um, which I very moving, very moving documentary. Whatever you love about Werner came off on screen. You can see it. Your it's a very it's it's hard to listen to, and it's sad, and it blood makes my blood fucking boil, and I think I was well. Okay, please explain the story first before I start giving you my notes on what I thought, because you will do it's your film, so I'm just gonna shut up. But what
oh
is
well,
what is whose story is it?
it's Bradford Bilota's story. So he just shares his story about reconnecting with his uncle back on his reserve, and Radford was part of the 60s group. He's a survivor of the 60s group, so it was his story, and it was him sharing. Well, he was. I guess I felt honored enough that he was able to be authentic on camera for myself and for me while I was recording. And I think he was at a point where he was ready to share this story that affected not because we hear a lot of the residential school stories, and we do not hear too much about the 60s school, and that gets lost. And there are a lot of other stories, but it's like not to get all political, right? But that's something that's happened to indigenous people, There isn't. I don't think there's any indigenous people I know who their 60 scoop and residential schools has not affected any of our families, and myself included. Been very directly affected by that through my parents and grandparents. But that's just some. He was, with knowing that there was a like I was honored that we had talked about this story prior a few years ago, and the idea was actually different because he was always gonna make a trek back to his home, but we didn't exactly know why. But he reconnected with his uncle Bobby, and yeah, we were just go talk about what happened with him, and he's gonna go. Well, what happens in the story? He makes a trek back, and he um, I don't say relives anything, but he just shares the story and he shares that journey and then find out what the lost mock what for him for Bradford it was always like the lost moccasin because he told me that story and I just thought okay well why don't we call it that and my producer even mentioned that at the time Darcy had said like what let's call it lost moccasin because that was a story Bradford had told me I was like yeah sure like yeah let's call it that because I did honestly didn't have a title I think I just at the beginning I had Bradford Billy story um, but um, there's that symbol metaphorically about he shares in the film that I don't want to ruin it for anyone, but he shares the story of a lost moccasin and what that means. And I try to obviously you've seen it, so
Yeah, no, I
uh,
don't want to ruin it for anybody either.
yeah, I'm trying to I want to say more, but it's like I want people to see it. Like I really do want
Yes,
people to see it.
I'm gonna make sure it's on the episode page so it can be seen. Like we can put a separate link for it because there's yeah, you can see it however you want people to see it. But the things I didn't know, like I was disgusted with finding out about how he says that just the one point. So we a little mini spoiler, but he says that, and this is public knowledge, but he says that you couldn't call the cops because the cops were the ones who were rounded up to go get the kids, and it's just like it's like how do people think that grabbing anybody's children is the right way to do anything? Like what how many yes people are in the room that not one person's got balls or character to be like, no, we don't do this. No, 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 no. We're doing this. We're being very bad people. Like that was very eye opening for me. And what's that like getting someone's story like that on camera? I mean, I would imagine that eventually two people who would know something like know that about each other would eventually have that conversation. But having it on camera is a lot different. So what was that like? Talking to him?
I my relationship with Bradford prior to that, we had talked, we had coffee, so we became friends. So when we became friends, it was a lot easier to kind of hear that, and I always knew this was about Bradford. This was about him and telling his story, and I always call it like Bradford's film. I don't really say, yeah, it's my, I'm the director and everything like that, but I always try to say like even now, the film is for Bradford and for the story for his story, and it's for um like we definitely want to use that as an educational tool and I think that's one of his long-term goals but just we had talked about his whole story prior to that so I did a pre-interview with him and we just talked about things that happened so I would write out the I guess ideas on how I would go about filming and telling his story and I'd always check with him I said are you okay with telling this are you okay with saying this and he was like yeah I'm good and because a lot of times in the pre-interview like he did tear up and I just want to be sure that he's okay with sharing that. And he says,
Yeah.
"No, this is important." So I'm like, "Yes." So we're going to tell that. So um, I hope that answers your question.
No, it does. It does. Like it's a private story, but it's also a national story. It's a stain on our country. Like there's a lot of moving parts to that. It's not just a simple there's a lot of moving parts. Essentially, it's the best way I can say it. So it was very like it was watching him tear up and going through all the motions was you captured a lot of who he is and how he wanted to tell that story. And I mean, as dark as that story is, you told it in a very, it was a very beautiful way to listen to it, if that makes sense to you.
No, that does, and I think too for the listeners out there, like we're in the story we talk about the 60 scoop, but and we talk about how there's so much I don't want to say misinformation, but amongst the non-indigenous peoples of Canada, I guess settler There's a whole story. I'm not trying to get political, but I'm just trying to describe it how
Yeah, I know what
a
you're
lot
getting
of
at.
people would
Yeah,
describe it.
yeah.
Like people who don't just they don't understand what really happened, and some of them, like I totally understand. Probably they don't care. Like, do you know what I mean? Like I'm saying that I don't mean it to sound so harsh.
No, I know what you're getting. You're
But
just like there's so much
it's
information that it's hard to get the right information, and they just stop.
well, and there's also the educational system of it. I remember one of my, I don't know if you know Kerry Chevy. He showed he posted this thing from a history book, and it was like in this history book that they're teaching in schools. And I'm probably wrong. I hope I'm pretty sure it was from a history book,
Sure.
but it was like in the history book, it was like because there was more settlers coming in from Europe, more immigrants coming in from Europe, the native people agreed to move more interior to accommodate them. And we're all like, what? Like, when did that
That's
happen? I
no,
was like,
no, no.
who wrote that? Like, no, you mean by being shot by the government? And yeah, of course, like, having our kids stolen, like, yeah, that happened. But again, but that goes to the education. So there's
Yeah,
people growing up and they're like, oh well, native people agreed and native people didn't. It's like just so much miseducation about that. And I didn't want to bring this up because for the listeners out there, I want you to go look up an artist, an indigenous, a native artist, Kent Monkman. And I was just looking for the name of this thing, but he painted this picture that I guess can say a lot more than I can describe it.
okay.
Whether it's for the 60 scoop or for residential schools, but it's called the Scream, and so it's a painting of um, RCMP and priests and nuns stealing children from Native people. So, and it's an art piece, and definitely it's on there. If you look up The Scream by Kent Monkman, you'll see a picture, and that can probably explain it way more than I can really. That probably captures a lot of the all that pain, a lot more than I can really explain it.
I will search that, and we will attach it to all of this as well too. Um, we were talking about this before we started recording, and I wanted to circle back to it, but for indigenous filmmaking in indigenous stories specifically, because this podcast is so new to me, I there's avenues and there was industries and there was genres of film that I just never bothered to get into because I liked what I liked and I was a naive idiot. And having to research this and then talking with new people, I was like, well, if you're going to do this, you're going to have to start watching other films. So I'm sadly ignorant to a lot of things only because I now get a chance to talk about it with people, and then that's how I'm learning about it. So I don't know much. Like, what is there enough that's being done? I'm sure it's probably not, but what is being done in Canada for Indigenous filmmakers and places to find Indigenous film stories, so people can see that part of film?
Right now, there is a growing movement, and I hope I'm part of that movement. But there have been mainstream films. I mean, the most recent one, I was just at, had a chance to attend TIFF online. So I had a chance to see some of the films. So Tracy Deer has a really great film coming out, and Michelle Latimer has a documentary coming out, and she made the series Trickster, that was based on Eden Robinson's film of the same name, Trickster. So there, other than that, I mean, I don't say other than that, I mean, include on top
Yeah,
of that,
yeah,
including that, or including is also Jeff Barnaby's Blood Quantum film just came out recently. And if you're a horror film lover, zombie lover, definitely put that on your list. Prior to that, Elmire Tailfeathers made a film that won like a Canadian, the equivalent of a Canadian Oscar for best act, best film, best act, best writing, best directing. I'm probably totally messing it. I don't have the actual stat, but I bet she won
it's the best.
some Canadian awards, top Canadian awards. Body Remembers When the World Broke Open is the name of the film, and that's won numerous awards all across the world. And that's an Indigenous film. There's a lot of other films that I'm probably some of my friends will be listening and be like, "Hey, you didn't mention my film." It's like I'm trying. I'm trying, but uh, right now they're like that's the one thing where is a discussion I'm having amongst my friends. How do we get our films out there? And um, so like how do we other than the main film festivals? I mean, if you want to look up native films, I'm going to give you a list of films right now. A list of
Please.
film festivals. So the Winnipeg Aboriginal Film Festival, WAF.ca, has is our local film festival for Indigenous filmmakers, our film for indigenous films. Gimli Film Festival, I've been working with them, Aaron and his team, and we've had a indigenous program. So I've been able to program a lot of local filmmakers, films, indigenous filmmakers, indigenous directors to have their films. Elias King's Film Festival was one of the is a film festival that plays Hollywood. They screen at the TCL Theater on Hollywood Boulevard in Los
Nice,
Angeles, or
nice.
Hollywood. So there's that one. The California American Indian and Indigenous Film Festival. Oh, that's a long name.
That's a mouthful.
That film festival is new and it's been coming up. Um, the American Indian Film Festival, where the Lost Moccasin just screened
Nice.
last week. Yeah, so and the American Indian Film Festival is like the longest running Indigenous film festival. So they've been running for about 45 years, I believe, 44 years, something like that. So I hope I get those numbers right. But the biggest Indigenous film festival right now is the Imaginative Film Festival, and that's in Toronto. So um, definitely, if you're looking for Indigenous films, I mean, that's start at those festivals.
Okay.
Start looking at them, because there's you hear you not all of the indigenous filmmakers get into TIFF, get into Sundance, get into these major top tier festivals. Definitely, we're all trying, I think. Um, but I think there's really a renaissance coming up, and this is a discussion I had with some people where I said, about 10 years ago when I got into filmmaking, like I actually seriously look. I say 10 years ago. When did I make my film? Oh, 07, 06, 05? I don't know. But back in those days when I just first started actually entertaining the idea of it, um, there was a renaissance I saw. I was like, oh, cool! There's all these indigenous filmmakers locally that are coming up and they're making films, and then they kind of disappeared. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It just what I understand now. There wasn't a lot of resources, and there wasn't a lot of information. And this might lead me. It might lead me into your question you wanted to ask earlier, but it might lead me into what I came up. I wanted to make sure locally that there was that for me, I wanted to meet other filmmakers. So I did something called the Filmmaker Actor Potluck for a few years with a local artist, Ali Taran, and she's a great actress. And she was local. She helped me. We did the Filmmaker Actor Potluck for a few years, and then from there grew the idea of like, hey, I know all these indigenous filmmakers, but they never come out. They never say hello. They never. So like, why don't I just try a group like that? Why don't I try Indigenous Film Group? And well, at the time, I just kind of gave it that simple name like
Yeah, yeah.
Indigenous Film Meetup Group or something. Um, so I was lucky enough to meet another filmmaker working at the Winnipeg Film Group at the time named Ben Williams, and Ben Williams had just started at the Winnipeg Film Group. Again, Winnipeg Film Group has been really good to me over the years. There's a great institution for any filmmakers wanting to get started. I think start there. Also, Video Pool, it's right next door to them.
I've heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so he said, "Hey, I want to do a filmmaker actor potluck." Well, he didn't say that in those words, but pretty much that's what he was saying. But I said, "You know what? I'm taking a break from that because I want to concentrate on an Indigenous film meetup." He's like, "Okay, well, let's do that." And I was like, "Cool." So we had our first meetup, which became the Winnipeg Indigenous Filmmakers Collective back in September 2014. Um, it's still going on. They just had an online meeting. I stepped down last year after 5 years of being like pretty much the main host, where we averaged roughly 30 attendees, Indigenous filmmakers, or
Nice.
people wanting to get into film, are just interested in the film. We average around 30 attendees every collective. We watch their films, we read scripts, we talk filmmaking, we have a circle discussion. And from that group, we create a nonprofit organization called the Indigenous Filmmakers Association. So the Indigenous Filmmakers, the IFA, well, just simple acronym. IFA is a nonprofit organization that we are just hoping to grow and create and help inspire our local Indigenous filmmakers. From that grew the first ever Indigenous Film Summit, which brought together back in 2018, brought together numerous filmmakers, professional filmmakers, industry players, or I'll just say
Yeah. No,
film
you're
industry
good. Yeah.
professionals
Yeah.
from all across Canada. And we just recently had our third year, which we went online back in August, and we had it 4 days in a row. We had about I can't think of a number, but our views reached around 4,000, 5,000,
Nice.
but 2 to 4,000 views online for our panel discussions, and we brought in actors who are like working in. Crystal Lightning was working in Trickster. We had actors from the U.S. Like I've involved a lot of organizations. I think coming together and networking with each other is really important. But um, that all grew out of just the idea of coming together, helping each other, and especially for me and for the IFAs, growing the local indigenous population. And I just want to go back to what I was saying before. I
Mm-hmm.
think when I heard about all these filmmakers coming up before me and they kind of disappeared and did their own thing, there wasn't all that those resources. There wasn't all that those resources. I was just gonna sorry.
That's okay.
I've been talking just I'm
Yeah.
out of breath here.
All good, dude. All good. You're flying. You're great. Keep going.
There was thanks. There wasn't a lot of those resources in play for them, and I think that's the one difference is that we're able to kind of keep in touch a lot more easier and a lot more. I don't want to say simpler, but I guess for lack of a better term, like simpler, and it's we have a lot of more. Like we're accessible to each other
Yeah.
to help each other learn the industry because the industry is a whole other beast that
I can totally
is
imagine.
like I make films, but I wouldn't consider myself in the professional film industry. But I am an independent filmmaker. Um, so there's that whole other beast that's happening. So it's really there's a really I've been able to meet all these great filmmakers from all across Canada and the U.S. Indigenous filmmakers who are making films because they love making films and they're getting them out there. And
Yeah.
I think next I'll be appearing probably not just on the podcast, but like a new filmmaker friend of mine asked me to be in his film documentary uh, that he's making
Sweet.
that talks about Indigenous filmmakers and horror films. So he wants me to kind of be one of the talking heads on there. So, well, I say that I don't know how he's going to film it, but I'm just saying that. But Red Cinema, Cinema Red, I think is the documentary online right now
Okay.
on YouTube. So, um, but with all that being said, it's like I think the main goal is like for me, I want to grow the Indigenous filmmakers here in Winnipeg, in Manitoba. I want to inspire them. I want to try and help them, guide them on their career because to have resources and have access to people that I didn't have access to when I was coming up, and to help shape the industry to a good place where we can be safe telling our stories, but just be able to tell our stories.
Yeah.
And when I say safe, I just mean maybe that safe's the wrong word. I let me give me a moment before we're encouraged to tell
Yeah.
our own stories.
Yeah.
I'll put it like that. Maybe
I know what you're
that's what
saying.
I'm trying to. That's what I'm trying to say. Is like we're being encouraged to tell our own story, where we don't just go at people, and we don't just say, "Hey, I have an idea," and a production. Not to say this. I'm sure this has happened, but I'm just hypothetically that a production company says, "Hey, cool, we like your idea, but we're gonna get this person over here from Toronto to direct it."
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, well, we don't want that. We want the filmmaker wants to direct. We were trying to get a system going like that, and that's difficult and it's a long road, but I understand that long road. So with the summit, we hope to bring everyone together. With the collective, we hope to inspire the young filmmakers, the rising filmmakers, and the new filmmakers. And just with my own filmmaking, I have 5 films I want to make, and Coffee Express is the first one, and then I want to make a horror film after that, and then I want to turn Rentless into the indigenous kung fu hustle.
You that's very Tarantino of you, sir. Make your 5 or make your 9 and then just be done, right? Like spread your career out over 40 years, make your 10 films and then be like, yeah, I made this series of films and they're all different and they're all my stories and they're all inspired by and yeah, no, that's perfect. I love that. Have like a little catalog. Don't be like Steven Spielberg and making like 39 billion movies. I mean, it's fun. Don't get me wrong. I like Ready Player One, but like you can slow down a bit, dude. No, I think like I just go. These are stories. I like stories. I like being exposed to new, different cultures and different walks of life and different ideas. And having opened up my door last year to foreign films, it's just I just don't understand how people don't have interest because indigenous people of color, bi, LGBTQ, like all of the different walks that don't get enough screen time there's some really fucking cool stories there. There's some really interesting heritage there. There's some really cool culture there. There's some really great lore there that it's like, okay, because it didn't come from the big 10 studios or it didn't come from either America or UK, it's not worthy of being on the screen. Right now is the perfect time for independent filmmakers. Like if you want people to come back to the theaters, I have this idea. You might be on board with it because you're creative, but like instead of commercials while we're waiting for the movie to start, why don't we play local independent filmmakers movies to satisfy our desire for constant entertainment instead of like learning about Scotiabank's next promotion? Like watching Lost Moccasin for 11 minutes before a movie is eye-opening. It's educational. It teaches you a different perspective. It makes you feel empathy and learn about a fucking horrible stain on your country. Then you can go off and watch Avengers and have fun, right? But like showcase something like yours before that, so it's not just mindless entertainment. It's more. But that's just my 2 cents from the
No, that's a really
nosebleeds.
great idea, and I think if we had theaters incorporating that, then there could be an issue. I know what I've heard is uh, theaters we have a hard time trying to get people to come out for daytime or something like that.
Yeah.
That could be an idea. It really could be
Like
thinking outside the box. But
I honestly I get the idea that where it comes from is such an immature place. Like it's not like this and I'm not being philosophical at all. I'm being very childish because it comes from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It comes from the Baby Herman sketch before the actual movie, and how when you went to go see the movie for the first time, you got the little Baby Herman sketch, and then you got the movie, and they were all tied in together. Now I know you can't do that with this, but like, I mean, there's a mandate from the CRTC to make sure that the content that's on the screen in this country, X amount percentage comes from Canada. It's made by Canadians about Canadian stories, and there's an indigenous population here that doesn't have a big enough market, and that just I'm dumbfounded by it. But I'm glad that you could show me and put some perspective and some stuff onto the show that we can let other people know that listen to this that there are these festivals that celebrate it, because I'm walking around in the dark. So thank you for that in regards to an education today.
no problem. You're welcome.
Um,
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I just hope it hasn't. I realized I was talking so long. We've been just having this discussion for like
this
over an hour, and
this is the
it's been
Roger this is the Roger show, dude. This is all about you. It's not about me. People don't I hope people don't download the show to listen to me, because that's a waste of your fucking time. So but
you are the host, and you are the catalyst for all these discussions that are happening. So I think people tune in to hear what you have to say.
okay, I'm sure I'll stop pandering. I agree. That said, though, before I let you go, there's 2 things. There's one thing I didn't tell you that we were gonna do, and if do you have time? Because if you don't have,
Oh, I hope it's
it's fun.
dinner or
It's
at least
dinner.
lunch or something.
Yeah. Okay, we'll make this quick.
I'm just kidding. Yes, of
Okay.
course, yes.
All right. So, did you ever watch Inside the Actors Studio?
I have. I just yeah, a
Okay,
couple
good.
of them, not all the time.
Good. You don't know what I'm going at then. That's perfect. It's even more fun. So, Inside the Actors Studio was that show where a guy used to interview actors and
Yep.
directors and talk to them about the craft. But at the end, he would ask, excuse me, he would ask 10 questions. And he would ask the same 10 questions to everybody. And they're very fun questions.
Do you have 10 questions or do you have 20?
I have 10.
Okay.
And they're very quick. We don't do long answers of this. We just do the first thing that pops into your head.
Groovy.
And here we go. All right. So, first question: what's your favorite word?
Hello.
Hello. That's a great word. That's that starts everything. Okay. Swell. What's your least favorite word?
Goodbye.
Smart ass. Creatively, what turns you on?
Imagination.
And creatively, what turns you off?
Lack of.
Okay. No, this makes sense. What sound or noise do you love?
Loved ones.
Okay. What sound or noise do you hate?
Uh, too much silence.
What's your favorite curse word?
Up yours.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Oh man. I was just telling someone else's. I'd be a truck driver, long
Nice.
haul truck driver.
Yeah. No, see the country? I deal with them
Hmm.
every day at work, so they always have a story or two or 12. They never want to get back in their truck. They never want to get back. I don't blame them, but they never want to get back in their truck. What profession would you like to do? What profession would you like not to do? Sorry.
Um, well, this I don't know if I should say this one not so much, but not that I didn't want to do it, but I look back now and I'm happy because there's a whole story side of the story of how I got in the film that I didn't share. But being a cop,
Okay.
being a
Okay.
police officer, because I almost there's a
Yeah,
whole story to that. Almost.
I can only imagine, sir. Okay. Lastly, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
You were right.
No,
I just give up to. I don't know what. I don't even know what
that's
that would mean,
perfect.
but
That's perfect, dude. That's totally perfect. Okay, so before we go, this whole thing is around Manitobans making movies. Specifically, it doesn't matter. We don't care anymore. We're branching out into television in 2021, so we're going to allow for everything content related to be on the show because we've been a little snobby. We've been like, no, just movies. We don't like the small screen. So, with that said, though, there's a thing about working in Manitoba. We ask everybody. It's the whole signature thing to the series. So, what do you love about working in Manitoba in the film industry? What is it that's kept you here and not made you move and all that stuff? Like, there's something, and there's a line of thought amongst the seven of you that I've talked to, and I bet you're going to say it, but I'll shut up and let you answer.
well, I'll say this: there's opportunity and freedom in filming in Manitoba and Winnipeg. Opportunity of the incredible tax credits that you, if you have the budget to take advantage of,
Yeah,
and the freedom that people still actually like filmmakers being around and people making films. There's something still magical about that.
yeah.
So from what I understand, for most people, there's no hindrance of, oh, this film's happening. It's more like, oh, this film happening. All right, who's starring? Cool.
World I, is it be yes, okay, so first of all, you did nail it on the head. Freedom and opportunity is a big thing here because, and it's probably because it is such, it's not an oversaturated market. It's not a huge market, so there's, I would imagine you guys don't have a lot of constraints, like not being in the industry. I'm not going to offer a solid opinion on the matter, but second to that though, um yeah, you're really set up here to succeed. This province does recognize its film talent, and
Mhm.
I mean, you guys are still allowed to work during a pandemic in some senses, and that's I mean, there's a that, not to get political. It's now my turn, Roger. Um, but I mean, there's a dedication to the industry here, and I hate that COVID is a great example of it right now. But the hardworking people, the creative types like yourself, like there's the gene pool is deep.
No, that you say that, and I agree because it's unfortunate that to get political. And look, I'm not a political person, and I do not have any kind of disdain or hate for our government, but I've noticed that a lack of leadership that needs to be addressed, and it's unfortunate because I want people to be safe, and I want people to go back to work, and I want, um, I'm looking forward to the day that we can have a barbecue at
Yeah,
the Luna Park with
yeah,
everyone.
yeah.
And
No,
I would
to
just like to see that. And if anyone's listening for the government, like I really, that's people just want to be safe and they want to know that things are going to be okay. And it's unfortunate that I've yet to see, and maybe I don't know, maybe I haven't listened enough, or, but it's just I'd like to see a bit better um, common leadership from our people, elected officials, because the people really need that. And I will tell you this to the people listening: you're going to be okay. Things will be over all right. And as human beings, we've gotten through worse. And just know that there will be light at the end of the tunnel. But the night is always darkest before dawn, as they say.
there's the filmmaker, and you're right there. I love it. No, you're right, dude. You're right. Yeah, like it's these are crazy times, and it's hard to make. Yeah, I couldn't agree with your sentiment more. There's a lot of crazy shit going on, and listen more, government. Just listen closely. That's as political as we get on the Real Debaters.
Yes.
We did argue once who would make the best prime minister, and I can't remember who I picked. We've done so many of these, but it's we only picked movie characters for that debate. It was a doozy.
Deadpool, eh? I'm just kidding. I just first thing comes to my mind. I did want to say this. Could I do amends on my when I get to the pearly gates and God is there?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, change it around.
What I'd like him to say is, thank you for doing as best as you can for everyone around you.
Oh, yeah. There you go. That's
the first thing comes to my mind. I was like, oh, why did I say that? That's hilarious. Can I add this really quick too?
Yeah, totally.
Is that I would love to see Winnipeg, and as an indigenous filmmaker, I'm a film lover. Don't get me wrong. I support all our filmmakers locally. But I would love to see, and I'm working on this to make Winnipeg and Manitoba the place for indigenous filmmaking and filmmakers. So I'd like to grow that part of our industry locally. And that's my long-term goal.
That's awesome. So, please send me all the things that we talked about, all the things that you dropped. I want to temporarily staple them to, or permanently staple them to your bio on this portion of the show, so that if people when people want to go find it, it's there, it's easy, it's accessible, right? And then we won't make people jump through hoops on stuff like that. But
for sure. But I guess the only thing I would say is if people want to see Lost Moccasin, they should contact me.
Okay.
It's not out there yet.
Yeah. Oh no, definitely. Yeah. No, we'll put that little snippet in there as well too, and I'll get your email address for everybody if they want to watch it.
For sure.
Dude, thank you so much for giving me your time and educating me on some stuff and talking about some stuff. I'm super happy you put some time aside for us.
No problem. I really appreciate you asking me to be part of your the podcast, and I really appreciate all the hard work you've been putting in, and I appreciate your time, and I think you're doing a good job, and I like to see your podcast grow.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. That's so nice. For everybody who's new to our show, thereeldebaters.ca. Just go there. That's where this episode's going to be in a few. That's where all of the things that we do on the show. That's where you're going to be able to find a lot of things that Roger talked to us about today. We'll put a little segment of film festivals for Manitobans and all that. I've been playing with some ideas, so this is a great way to start with it. If you want to email the show, it's thereeldebaters@gmail.com. All of our spelling is REEL. Reeldebaters.ca, thereeldebaters@gmail.com. The Reel Debaters, the Reel Debaters, the Reel Debaters. Do you ever do that when you say a word so much, Roger, that it just loses its meaning after a while?
Every day.
All right, dude. Well, you take care. Stay safe. We'll be in touch, and I'd love to have you on and do a debate with us. I think it'd be fun.
Sure. That'd be great.
Awesome.
Let me know when.
Yeah.
I know where, but let me know when.
Yeah, we'll make it easy. You can do it. I haven't been wearing pants the entire time. I'm kidding. I have. But all right. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to another Reel Debaters production. My guest has been Roger Boyer. Did I say? I never say.
That's correct.
Yes, finally, Roger Boyer. I have been Micheal Petrow, and we are gone. All right, dude.